When I graduated from college in May 2004, I moved in with my parents who were living in Upland, California. I had just finished a degree in film production, but I wanted to try acting. One way to get in seemed to be working as a background actor or extra. It was around this time that my anxiety and depression seemed to get much worse. I had registered with Central Casting in Burbank in February 2002, and in March of 2004, I worked as an extra for the first time in the film Cellular. Another priority for me was to learn more about my disability and get professional help, and it seemed the first thing I needed was a diagnosis, which I was unable to get at Loyola Marymount University. Age discrimination was something I would have to get used to. I was now trying to balance two things: getting professional psychological help and beginning to establish myself as an actor. As I mentioned in my first autism video, I thought acting and performing arts might provide a coping skill for social awkwardness. While on stage, or on a set, I would have a character to play which I could focus on, and not be my typical awkward self. A script, director, assistant director, or stage manager would tell me how to move, respond, and just carry myself in general. I also thought learning performing arts would give me some self-confidence, and I would not worry as much with many people watching. And I would be able to speak to a large audience with the same clearness and enthusiasm as I did when speaking to a single person. I was in my third year of college when I had heard about Asperger's syndrome. I spoke with a psychology professor who had a son with this condition. It seems this meant high-functioning autism, or a mild case of autism. By the time I graduated, some people in my family were suggesting this as well. I was determined to find more psychological help and to get a diagnosis. I was hoping I would get help from a local place. Within a month of living in Upland again, I started seeing someone at Inland Valley Recovery Services on Mountain Avenue in Upland. One doctor did prescribe some medications, but no one there would give me counseling or therapy. As I had experienced before, I was met with a lot of people telling me how rude I was. I suppose it is annoying to ask for tests and a diagnosis over and over again. It was also aggravating that they would not collect any of my previous records. So I tried contacting SPS at Loyola Marymount University to see if they would send a copy to this new office. After some asking, they agreed to send a copy to me, but the first thing they sent me was the file of another patient. They had sent me the wrong file. I sent it back and asked for my file. When I received the correct file, I made a copy and gave it to the staff at Recovery Services, but I saw no indication that they read it. For therapy, I went to Catholic Charities in Pomona. The priest who had been my counselor during my senior year suggested that resource. An intern there named Joan took my case, and she became my therapist for the next 3 years. I met with her every Tuesday that I didn't have a job as a background actor. Joan may have needed hours to obtain her license, and that could be why she put up with me for 3 years. After a while, the team at Recovery Services arranged a series of tests, though these seemed to be the same tests that I was given in 5th grade and while a student at LMU. One test involved arranging pictures to form a story, and another consisted of seeing patterns and choosing the next object from a choice of 4. All of these activities were timed, so there was pressure to work as quickly as I could. After all this, I was told I had severe anxiety, depression, and very poor social skills. Still, no one would give me a diagnosis, at least not a scientific diagnosis. All I was told was strictly opinion. At least one person there suggested that I may have obsessive compulsive disorder, but no one would diagnose me with Asperger's or autism. I also tried getting medical help, wondering if I might have a neurological problem. There was also my low tolerance for pain, as mentioned in my first autism video. I was desperate to know if this problem was physiological or psychological. After seeing my primary care doctor, I went to see a neurologist at Arrowhead Regional Medical Center in Colton, the nearest hospital that would accept my insurance. I got an appointment in the outpatient clinic with a neurologist whom I will call Dr. Nell. She came into the exam room only long enough to tell me that there was nothing she could do. After that day, I tried calling the staff there asking for more help and speaking to various receptionists and nurses, asking how my problem might be addressed. A few calls later, they only suggested that I make an appointment with Dr. Nell again. After waiting a month in between the two appointments, I got into the exam room with Dr. Nell and she simply said, "Why do you come back? There's nothing I can do for you." Next, I tried calling to make another appointment with a doctor who could actually help. At around this point, the nurses started hanging up on me when I called. So I took my case next to the patient advocate. I will call her Melody. One nurse said, "We will cross that bridge when we come to it." But once the next doctor's appointment had passed, she would only hang up on me. Melody said the appropriate action would be taken for the ones who hung up on me, and she would see if she could get me scheduled for an MRI. Once this was done, the neurologist would have something to use as a reference. Melody told me that an MRI was a non-invasive, painless procedure. When I got to the hospital on the day of the appointment, I realized this was not the case, since ink or dye, some kind of contrasted material, needed to be placed into my vein through an IV. This, I was told, would go throughout my circulatory system and up into my brain so the image can be taken. Some people had told me one might become claustrophobic in an MRI machine. Some had told me it sounds like an oncoming train. To me, it sounded like a machine gun. Fortunately, I was given earplugs. Neither claustrophobia nor loud noise bothered me in this procedure. My problem was simply having to stay still for about 40 minutes with the painful IV in my arm. Somehow, I managed to get through it, but even after the IV was removed, the pain continued. Next, I was scheduled for another appointment with Dr. Nell, and Melody would be there at the appointment. During the visit, the doctor told me that the MRI looked normal except for an enlarged vein in the left front of my head. This was not a problem, she told me. If it were an artery, there would be a problem. We talked at least 45 minutes, but since nothing terrible had been found, she said that in the end, there was still nothing she could do to help. Over the next 2 months, I called that hospital many times, asking for more help and finding a diagnosis, and also asking what to do about the pain in my right arm for the IV. After a few weeks, I was convinced that a piece of needle had been left behind, since that was what it felt like. After many calls, the nurses and receptionists started hanging up on me again. Sometimes they suggested I go to the emergency room, since I was not finding help anyplace else.